I had always thought of the forest as a place of healing, a quiet refuge where the noise of city life couldn't follow me, where stress melted away in the hush of pine needles and the distant chatter of birds. That was why, in late September, I loaded my pack, strapped on my boots, and drove north into the backcountry of Montana. I wasn't going for a weekend getaway, but for a full week, 7 days completely off the grid, alone with nothing but my thoughts, my gear, and the woods. I parked my truck at the last official trailhead just after sunrise. The autumn air carried a crisp bite, the kind that promised cold nights but clear skies. Most hikers would stick to the established paths, but I wanted distance. I studied my topographical map one last time, tracing my finger over ridges, streams, and valleys until I picked an unmarked clearing near a shallow lake. It was miles from any ranger cabin, far beyond where most backpackers would dare wander. That was exactly the point. The first day's hike was brutal but exhilarating. The deeper I went, the fewer signs of people remained. By mid-afternoon, the trail thinned to nothing more than game tracks. Branches clawed at my jacket, rocks rolled beneath my boots, and more than once I had to climb deadfall blocking my way. But the isolation felt pure, almost cleansing. I set camp near the lake by sunset, watching the reflection of the sky burn crimson before fading into deep indigo. The only sound was the wind through the trees and the soft lapping of water. That night, I lay in my tent listening to owls and crickets. For the first time in months, I felt at peace. But peace didn't last long. On my second day, I pushed farther into the forest to explore. I carried only a small pack, marking my route with a knife by carving shallow slashes into tree bark every 100 yards or so. By noon, I had hiked deep into a ravine. The air was cooler there, heavy with moss and damp earth. When I turned back, I followed the marks I had made, except some of them were gone. I thought maybe I had missed the right trees, but as I retraced my steps more carefully, I realized the cuts had vanished. Where I swore I had carved my blade, the bark was smooth, unbroken, as if it had healed overnight. I shook it off as exhaustion or a poor memory, but unease gnawed at me. By the time I made it back to camp, my boots were caked in mud and my nerves were frayed. That night, something changed in the forest. The crickets that had sung me to sleep the first night went silent. The owls stopped calling. Instead, a scratching sound came from somewhere just beyond my tent. Slow, deliberate, like claws raking against bark. Every hair on my body stood on end. I gripped my knife, waiting, listening. The noise moved around me, circling, never coming closer, but never leaving. Sometime before dawn, I drifted into a restless sleep, the scratching still etched into my mind. By the third day, I was considering cutting the trip short, but pride kept me rooted. I told myself it was just the natural eeriness of being alone, that I was letting fear win. Determined to push back, I hiked again, this time marking my trail more aggressively. Deep gashes, strips of cloth tied around branches, even piles of stacked rocks. I wouldn't get lost again, but the forest had other ideas. As the sun sank lower, I stumbled into a clearing that froze me in place. Scattered across the ground were remnants of other campsites, torn nylon, rusted cookware, collapsed tents. Yet they weren't decayed enough to be decades old. Some looked eerily new, as if left behind only weeks before. My stomach churned when I spotted one tent, shredded nearly to ribbons, that looked almost identical to mine. Same color, same size, even the same brand. That night, back at my own camp, the silence pressed in heavier than ever. My fire hissed and cracked, throwing shadows that seemed to stretch unnaturally long. I could feel something watching me. Not an animal, not a bear or a wolf, but something else, something patient. When I crawled into my tent, I noticed the smallest detail that nearly stopped my heart. The zipper pull on the inside was bent. I had zipped it closed perfectly before I left earlier, and now it was warped, as though something had tugged it from the outside while I was gone. Sleep didn't come, only dread. The fourth day dawned gray and misty. My first thought was simple: leave. Pack everything, hike back, and put as much distance as possible between me and this cursed place. But the forest didn't make it that easy. When I tried to retrace my way back toward the trailhead, I quickly realized the forest had shifted. The trees didn't match my map anymore. Paths curved where they should have been straight. Streams I had crossed once before no longer ran in the same direction. Every landmark I had marked, every cloth, every rock stack was gone. Even my own footprints in the damp soil faded faster than they should have, as though the earth was swallowing them whole. By noon, I had been walking for hours, only to end up back at the lake. My camp was still there, but something about it was wrong. The tent sat at a crooked angle, though I had pitched it carefully. My gear was scattered, though I had packed it neatly. And worst of all, the fire pit, which I had left cold and dead, smoldered faintly as though someone had lit it while I was gone. I backed away, every instinct screaming that I wasn't welcome. That night was the longest of my life. I sat awake in my tent, knife in hand, listening as the forest pressed closer. The scratching returned, louder now, more aggressive, like nails dragging directly against the fabric of my tent. I didn't dare shine my flashlight. I was too afraid of what I might see. At one point, the entire tent seemed to tremble, as though something massive had brushed against it. I pressed my hand against the nylon, and for a split second, something pressed back. By the fifth day, I was unraveling. My food supplies were running low, my nerves shot. I tried again to escape, this time heading in the opposite direction of the lake. But once more I found myself looping back. Each time, the forest seemed to erase my passage behind me, leaving no sign that I had ever walked that way. That evening, I returned to find two tents in the clearing. One was mine, the other was not. It was an exact duplicate, right down to the bent zipper pull. My hand shook as I circled it, peering inside. Empty, yet wrong. Its interior seemed slightly larger than it should have been, stretching back unnaturally far into darkness. I ran, but the forest doesn't let go so easily. By the sixth night, I no longer trusted my senses. I would hear branches breaking where nothing stood, see flickers of movement out of the corner of my eye. My camp itself seemed to rearrange every time I left, my tent facing a different direction. My backpack moved. The fire pit shifted. I was being toyed with, erased piece by piece. On the seventh morning, I woke to find my tent gone entirely. I lay on the bare ground, my sleeping bag damp with dew, my pack half buried in leaves. It was as though the forest had swallowed my camp whole. I stumbled through the trees, delirious, driven only by desperation. And then I saw it, the trailhead, my truck, exactly where I had left it. Relief crashed over me, but as I ran toward it, something gnawed at the back of my mind. The clearing looked too perfect. The truck gleamed, free of the dust and scratches it had carried before. Even the license plate numbers shimmered oddly, as though not entirely fixed. I stopped short, realization dawning. The forest hadn't let me go. It was only showing me another imitation, another lure, another false campsite. The last thing I remember before the world went dark was the sound of scratching, not from the trees this time, but from inside the truck. Camping alone had always been my way of escaping the noise of life. Some people needed beaches or cities to unwind, but for me, it was the forest, dense, endless, and indifferent. In the fall of 2021, I decided to push my boundaries farther than I ever had before. I chose the forests of northern Maine, a stretch of wilderness known for its size, isolation, and lack of marked trails. I parked my truck at the last patch of gravel road, shouldered my heavy pack, and started into the woods. The first hours were peaceful. The canopy above was painted with orange and crimson leaves, the ground damp with fallen needles and moss. The silence was total, broken only by the sound of my boots crushing wet earth. That kind of silence always comforted me. It felt like stepping out of the modern world into something older and more honest. By mid-afternoon, I stumbled across something that immediately caught my attention. A massive, hollow tree. It towered above the others, its trunk blackened around the opening as if lightning or fire had gutted it long ago. The opening was wide enough for me to step inside, though the smell was damp and sour, like rot and stagnant water. I snapped a picture on my phone, then moved on, thinking nothing of it. I made camp that evening near a creek, pitching my tent between two sturdy pines. The first night was uneventful. I cooked over my small stove, read by headlamp, and fell asleep to the gentle sound of water trickling over stones. The second night was when things changed. It started with a sound dull, rhythmic thuds echoing faintly through the trees. At first I thought it was just wood creaking, branches shifting in the wind, but the noise grew more regular, more deliberate. Knock, knock, knock. Each pause between thuds was almost identical, like the slow beat of some heavy drum. I sat in my tent, listening, trying to pinpoint the direction. It seemed to come from deep within the forest. The thought of that hollow tree flickered through my mind. The next morning, I tried to shake it off, but when I stepped out of my tent, I noticed something odd near the fire pit. Small bones, no larger than my finger, were arranged neatly in a circular pattern. Birds maybe, or squirrels, but I hadn't placed them there. I stared at them for a long time before scattering them with my boot, telling myself it was probably the work of some predator during the night. Still, unease gnawed at me. Later, I hiked again and passed by the hollow tree. This time, I noticed something else. Tied to a low branch was a bundle of feathers, bound together with brittle twine. It looked handmade, primitive. I didn't touch it. Instead, I moved on quickly, the weight of unseen eyes heavy on my back. That night, the knocking returned, louder now, faster. My heart pounded in rhythm with it as I sat upright in my sleeping bag, gripping my flashlight. But every time I shined the light outside, the forest remained empty, still and silent. When I turned it off, the knocking started again. I barely slept. By the third day, the forest felt wrong. The birds were gone. No squirrels darted across the branches. The usual hum of insects had vanished, leaving only a hollow, oppressive silence. Even the creek seemed to run quieter, as though the entire forest was holding its breath. And then, just after noon, I found something that nearly made me abandon everything and run. I returned to the hollow tree, unable to resist checking it again. I crouched, shined my flashlight into its depths, and froze. The hollow didn't stop after a few feet, like it should have. It stretched downward, far deeper, like a vertical tunnel spiraling into the ground. The beam of my light barely reached its bottom, and then something moved. It was pale, slick, and impossibly fast, vanishing into the depths before I could process what I'd seen. My stomach lurched. The air inside the tree pulsed faintly, almost like breathing. I staggered back, heart hammering, the sour smell clinging to my nostrils. I knew then that the hollow wasn't dead. It wasn't even a tree anymore. It was something else, an entrance. That night, the knocking was no longer distant. It came from the base of my tent. Slow, insistent. I didn't sleep at all that night. I sat in my tent clutching my knife. Every sound magnified until it felt like the forest was pressing against the thin nylon walls. When dawn finally broke, I made a decision. I had to leave. I packed quickly, stuffing my gear into my pack with shaking hands, and started hiking back toward the direction of my truck. But the forest didn't let me go easily. Trails twisted in ways they hadn't before. Streams bent in directions opposite to what I remembered. My compass needle spun in lazy circles. After hours of walking, I found myself standing in the clearing with the hollow tree again. The air was heavy, damp, thick with that sour smell. The bundle of feathers was gone from the branch, replaced with a small stone figure. Crude, humanoid, its head tilted unnaturally to the side. I felt sick. I tried another direction, pushing through thickets until my arms were scratched raw. Still, every path curved back toward the tree. Each time I returned, the clearing looked slightly different. Stones arranged in spirals, more bones scattered across the roots, markings carved into the bark that hadn't been there before. That night, I couldn't bring myself to set up my tent. I sat by a weak fire, staring at the hollow tree in the distance. The knocking began again, louder than ever. It rattled in my chest, vibrating through the soil, echoing like a heartbeat beneath my feet. And then, faintly, I heard something else, scratching, climbing, dragging against the inside of the hollow. Something was trying to come out. The fire sputtered as a cold wind swept through the clearing. I clutched my knife, eyes fixed on the black opening. My breathing grew shallow, every instinct screaming to run, though there was nowhere left to go. The scratching grew frantic, the knocking turning into pounding. The ground trembled, and then I saw it. Hands, pale, slick, too long, gripping the inside edges of the hollow. Fingers that bent at impossible angles, nails scraping deep grooves into the bark. A face emerged next, if you could call it that. Smooth, featureless skin stretched taut, with only the faintest indentations where eyes and a mouth should have been. It tilted its head, listening, smelling, as though it sensed me sitting frozen by the fire. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. It crawled halfway out of the hollow before retreating, as if testing the air. The scratching faded, the knocking slowed, and the clearing sank back into silence. I don't remember falling asleep, but I must have. When I woke at dawn, the tree was just a tree again. No marks, no bones, no carvings. The clearing looked untouched, as if nothing had happened at all. But my pack was gone. My tent was gone. My stove, my sleeping bag, even my boots gone. I was barefoot, my clothes damp with dew. The only thing left beside me was the small stone figure, its head tilted to the side, staring. I don't know how I got back to my truck. My memory is patchy, fractured. One moment I was sitting in the clearing. The next I was stumbling barefoot onto the gravel road where I had parked days before. My vehicle sat there, exactly as I had left it, key still in the ignition. I drove until I hit the first sign of civilization, shaking so hard I could barely hold the wheel. Even now, months later, I dream of that hollow tree. I dream of the knocking, of the pale hands reaching, of the forest rearranging itself around me. And sometimes, in the quiet hours of night, I hear it again, faint, deliberate. When I planned my solo camping trip in the Pacific Northwest, I imagined sweeping views, fresh mountain air, and the kind of silence you can't find anywhere near civilization. I didn't imagine fear. I didn't imagine the sense of being hunted. It was mid-July when I parked my Jeep at the base of a remote trailhead. The ridge I wanted to reach was miles away, climbing through dense old-growth forest before opening into a high clearing that overlooked valleys of endless pine. Few hikers attempted it, especially alone. That was exactly why I chose it. The first day was tough but beautiful. The air smelled of cedar and damp earth, and sunlight flickered between towering firs as I worked my way upward. I stopped only once, drinking from a stream, before pressing higher. By late afternoon, I crested the ridge. The view was staggering. Rolling mountains stretching like waves, peaks glowing gold in the fading light. I felt like I was standing at the edge of the world. I set up camp near the ridge line, my tent facing the valley below. Dinner was simple, just dehydrated food and instant coffee. But the taste felt perfect with that view. As dusk settled, I sat outside my tent and watched the forest transform under the setting sun. That's when I noticed it. Across the ridge, maybe 200 yards away, a figure stood between the trees. At first I thought it was another hiker, but the longer I stared, the stranger it became. The figure was tall, too tall. Its outline was sharp against the dim light, and though it stood completely still, I felt the undeniable weight of its gaze. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, and when I looked again, it was gone. I tried to convince myself it was just shadows, fatigue playing tricks. But that night, I struggled to sleep. Every rustle outside my tent set my nerves on edge. At one point, when lightning flickered far in the distance, I thought I saw the figure again, this time closer, crouched at the tree line, unmoving. By the time the lightning faded, there was only darkness. The second day, I tried to shake the memory. I hiked along the ridge, took photos, and sketched notes in my journal. But unease shadowed me. The forest was too quiet. I didn't see deer, didn't hear birds. The only sound was the wind brushing through the high branches. By late afternoon, as I prepared another fire, I noticed something near my tent. Footprints. Huge, elongated, pressed deep into the soil. They circled my campsite before vanishing into the underbrush. I tried to measure them with my boot. They were at least twice the size. Too big for a person. Too big for anything I wanted to imagine. That night, the figure returned. I saw it through the mesh of my tent door, standing just beyond the firelight. Tall, still, watching. My chest tightened, and I gripped my knife with white knuckles, frozen in place. Hours seemed to pass with it unmoving. Only when dawn broke did I realize I had fallen into a restless half-sleep, the figure still etched into my memory. By the third day, food tasted like dust. My hands shook when I boiled water. I thought about leaving, but the ridge seemed to hold me in place. Whenever I tried to descend, the trail twisted, the trees closed in, and I found myself back at camp, disoriented and sweating. That evening, something new appeared. Around my tent, branches had been stacked into crude formations, leaning against each other, pointing inward. At first I thought it was debris from the wind, but the angles were too deliberate, too purposeful. They looked like markers. I was no longer just being watched. I was being claimed. The fourth day began under a heavy sky. Clouds clung to the ridge, smothering the valley in gray. The air felt electric, charged, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. I knew then that I couldn't last another night. I had to escape, even if it meant abandoning everything. I stuffed my essentials into my pack and started down the trail. The trees seemed darker, the path steeper. Several times I lost the trail entirely, pushing through thick brush only to emerge back at my own fire pit. It was like the ridge itself was refusing to let me go. By mid-afternoon, exhaustion hit. I collapsed near a fallen log, chest heaving, sweat running cold despite the chill. That's when I heard it breathing, heavy and measured, only a few feet away. I turned slowly, and my blood froze. The figure crouched behind the log, closer than ever. Its body was massive, elongated limbs bent wrong, its skin dark and textured like bark. Where a face should have been, there was only a hollow shadow, a suggestion of features that shifted when I tried to focus. It tilted its head, studying me the way I might study an insect trapped in a jar. I stumbled backward, heart hammering, and it didn't follow. It just watched. I ran. Branches tore at my arms, rocks sliced my hands, but I didn't stop. Every time I looked back, lightning illuminated the ridge, and the figure was there, closer, always closer, yet never moving when I stared directly at it. That night, a storm broke over the ridge. Rain lashed against my tent, thunder rattled the earth, and lightning flashed in violent bursts. I sat curled inside, knife gripped tight, every muscle trembling. Between flashes, I heard pacing outside, heavy footsteps circling, the sound of breath, deep, steady, patient. When lightning illuminated the clearing again, I saw it. It was crouched low, just feet from my tent, head tilted in that same unnatural angle, arms pressed against the ground like a predator ready to spring. Its body filled the space, impossibly large, blocking out the view of the trees. The storm raged, thunder deafening, but in those white-hot flashes of light, the figure never moved. It just stared. I don't remember when I passed out. My last memory is of its shadow stretching across the tent wall, longer and longer, until it filled every inch. When I woke at dawn, the storm had passed. The forest was quiet again. Too quiet. My tent was shredded, my pack torn open, my gear scattered. Huge footprints led away from camp, down into the valley. I followed them for a while before stopping. They didn't end. They stretched on forever, deeper into the wilderness, as if the watcher was still out there, waiting, patient as ever. I eventually made it back to my Jeep, though I don't remember how. The drive home was a blur. But even now, when storms roll over the mountains and lightning cracks the sky, I swear I see it again, just beyond the ridge line, watching, always watching.